Solve discipuli Latinae. Well, all right. Well, here we are, Suetonius-AugusTA 78. So, we read in the introduction some of the nuances of Roman biography, but to me, I think this is what makes biography great. This is nothing earth-shattering. This is just a snippet of insight into the daily life of one of the most famous and powerful men the world has ever seen. In fact, some recent economists estimated that he may have been the wealthiest man who ever lived. Some estimated his estate when he died at worth a couple $1 trillion. Well, I mean, he owned all of Egypt and all of Gaul, Britain, and Syria, and some chunks in North Africa. But what he did was he personally controlled the grain trade from Egypt. I mean, that would be like if one guy controlled all the Middle Eastern oil. Yeah, he'd be a trillionaire too. But Augustus, despite his fabulous wealth, was really kind of a plain man. And that is borne out in this reading here by Suetonius when he describes the everyday work habits of Augustus. You know, what do we run across? We run across a guy who doesn't really like getting up early in the morning. And a guy who likes to, kick off his shoes and lay down, do a little studying here and there. A guy who gets a little irritated by all the official duties that he has to do. Okay, so just a normal guy. And yet, it's important, I think, for us to understand this particular time and culture and this man, because God in his wisdom chose this particular time period for the advent of his Son and our Savior, the Lord Jesus. All right, now let's go to the text here, work habits of Augustus. So, it's actually pretty straightforward. Now, in this first sentence, we have a couple ablative absolutes. Do you see them? Okay. Now, ita ut. Notice when I mentioned this last reading, but whenever we have ut, I'm immediately looking for a subjunctive. Now, scanning down the line, do I see a subjunctive? No, I don't. Okay, so when I don't see a subjunctive, then I translate ut simply as. So ita ut, just as he was. Ita ut erat. And what was he? Vestitutus calciatusque. Okay? So that's the way he just kind of walked around the house. Now, we have our first ablative absolute here. Rectectis pedibus, there's an A. Okay. Conquiescebat, you should be able to get it from that root. And then our second ablative absolute clause here with manu and apposita. You just have to really massage this phrase into English. Apposita, of course, it comes from pono, right? To put, manu ad oculos. So apposita, I'm not sure what exactly the nuance is. Not just that he placed, but that he actually apposita, he placed against. That's really the preposition ob positum or ob pono. So against something. So it gets the derived meaning of covered. Okay. Now, moving on to the next phase of the evening. Okay. So we have cibum meridianum, but then the evening meal, the former meal, was the cena. Okay. And usually these were lavish affairs. Okay. Recipio se is a military term, and maybe you remember what that particular idiom means. Recipio se, a military term. Okay. Now, your textbook mentions this word, and it's just difficult to translate because he uses one word to kind of express an entire concept. All right. So I'll let you wrestle with that a little bit. Is it an adjective modifying this? Well, it's just kind of a strange phrase. Your textbook has some guidance on that. So please take note of that. We'll see what we come up with when we go through it. All right, now we have a break, right? So right there. Now, also in your book, there's a long explanatory note about donek. In fact, I'm going to put this donek clause in purple to just differentiate it. Okay, so donek is a clause, a temporal type of a temporal clause, okay, in what we call an indefinite temporal. So it just means until, right? But we don't know exactly when that is. That's why it's indefinite. But important for us is that it takes the subjunctive, okay? But now, yeah, okay. Now, right. So that phrase, conficio. Now, we have an ought. All right, so we have two separate clauses here. And this whole phrase actually goes together. Now, just match up the endings. Okay? Match up the endings and see what you come back with. And ex maxima parte. Okay, so he's talking about his work habits, remember. So what does he do after lunch? He goes into the study until residua omnia of actus diurni. Now this is an adjective, diurni, daily. Or ex maxima parte. Okay, so either omnia conficeret or ex maxima parte conficeret. Okay, and ad multum noctem permanebat. Okay, so he was kind of a loner. I mean, we get that impression from other places that Caesar Augustus was not a super outgoing, vivacious man. He was kind of quiet, and he preferred solitude. Okay, now, lectum here, lectum can certainly mean couch or sofa. Here in this context, it probably means bed. So this is now we started out at noon, and we went to the early evening, and then after dinner, what he did, and now we're in bed. In lectum inde transgressus, num amplius cum plurimam quam. Okay, we just piled up the adverbs here. Non amplius cum plurimam quam. I think you know what he's trying to say. He's talking about the amount of sleep that Caesar was used to getting. Okay, and that's pretty clear here. Septem horas dormiebat. Now, the next phrase, this ne, is a little bit different here. Okay, we do have a subjunctive clause here, a negative purpose, but it seems strange to contrast this with ut, or with sed. Okay, but then we have ut, and then we have another subjunctive here with aspergisgerator. All right, so it's not terribly hard, but we have ne, negative purpose, and then ut, kind of a positive purpose. Okay, so he's talking about how long he slept. And the point he's making here is that he didn't just crash through for 7 hours, but very frequently this also happened as he passed the evening. Okay? And Suetonius makes a note of that, right? So we have si reciperare non posset, all right? So we have we have really reciperare. That is an alternate form in the subjunctive of aris, and I think that's the way you should take it here. So what kind of condition do we have here? We have C plus an imperfect subjunctive, ... imperfect subjunctive. I'm going to ask you that tomorrow in class. What kind of condition is that? Okay, and of course that helps you understand how to translate it. All right. Now, this, I think you get the gist of it. It's an interruptum somnium. Now, this is just a parenthetical comment, as it happens, as occasionally happens. This happens to older guys, right? Rarely sleep through the night. Okay, so what happens then if he's awake? Here's another AA, okay? Okay, and then resumebat. What was he resuming? If possible, somnum. So, and we have a que here, new thought. Producibat ultra primum saepe lucem. Okay, produco, we know what duco means, so produco, very literally, he led it forward. But, you know, in the context here of sleeping, it gets the idea of extending. You're leading it forward or leading it in front. Okay, so now he moves on. He's had a rough night sleeping. What happens now when he finally is able to fall back asleep? All right. Now, I think the next phrase is really interesting. In tenebris umquam nisi accidento aliquo. Okay. So, accidente aliquo. Yeah, you know, we would expect what we're probably missing is an esset. Okay, a nisi esset. Okay, accidente. Sidio, to sit. Ad sidio is really what accidente is. That's really ad. When ad is compounded with verbs, and here we have unt. What type of participle? Okay. Now, this is interesting too. New thought. Matutina vigilia offendebatur. Now, I wouldn't translate that was offended. Offended, that doesn't really capture the nuance. But think about how you can translate offendebatur when it comes to matutina vigilia. Okay? Now, there's a long note here. We have, let's put this condition here. We have C plus esset, and then we have na plus a subjunctive. Okay. Yeah, and then finally we have our verb here with manebat, which is of course indicative. All right. So, officii sacri here refers to sacred rites. Very often, because he was Pontifex Maximus, the leader of the official state religion, he had to be at these things, and a lot of times they were matutina. He didn't like that. Now remember, causa is post-positive. Okay? That means that we look backward here towards these genitives. Okay? Now, what are you going to do with this gerund here? Okay, here I think if you substitute, well, no, I wouldn't. I'm not going to say it. If you put in ad, but you get the sense of yeah, you can put in ad vigilandum. That expresses the idea of purpose. Okay, it was a thing. Now, what form of the adverb is this? What form of the adverb is martyrius? Not just martyre, but martyrius. What form, what degree of the adverb is that? Okay. It contra commodum, and lest he should not do this contra convenience. Okay, so sometimes duty called him, and sometimes you get the impression it called him a ways away, maybe even out of the city. And in that case, he didn't stay at home, but where did he stay? He stayed in proximo cenaculo. And notice the genitive here. These two go together in a sense, but this, of course, is singular and this is plural. Okay. Now, cuius cumque, this is indefinite, of anyone. Okay. That's just indefinite, of anyone. Okay, thus sic quoque saepe. So we start out with three little connectives and an adverb. Here, the participle, and your textbook explains this is that partitive genitive, like the Latins like to say, what of new? Okay, they use the partive idea. So we have indigane somni, lacking of sleep, okay, or from sleep. Now, our last subjunctive clause here is dum. And here we see our first subjunctive. Okay, but now condormiebat here is not a subjunctive. But at the same time, I know you want to take this as an ablative absolute. Okay, but the et really forces us to take this as deposita esset. They're just missing the subjunctive form of sum there. So that's the way I would read it. So dum pervicos deportaretur et deposita esset lectica. That, I think, if you put that in mentally, it'll make more sense. Then this phrase here, inter aliquas moras, and here condormiebat, not just dormiebat, but condormiebat. He was crashed. He was crashed. So it's interesting here that sleep plays such an important role in the management of the kingdom. And you know what I'm going to say, students, it also plays a great role in the management of your academic life. Okay, that is our pre-reading for Suetonius-AugusTus 78. Wale.